In a digital age where every transaction can be tracked, financial privacy is increasingly rare. Seth for Privacy is vice president at Cake Wallet, a mission-driven team building self-custody wallets designed from the ground up for privacy and usability. He's spent years advocating for tools that treat privacy as a feature, not as an edge case. Seth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Lindsey. Really excited to do this after a few months of me bailing on you. So it'll be good to finally have this conversation and get to chat about important things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on and joining us. We haven't covered privacy yet, so I'm really pleased you could make it and cover this important topic. So you are widely known as a privacy advocate, and you host the Opt Out podcast. What prompted you to initially take the step and help build privacy tools at Cake? Or what were you doing before? What led you up to that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey for me. I'm coming from like a cybersecurity IT background. I would say, 6 years ago now, didn't care at all about personal privacy. Like, it wasn't even on my radar. Technically, I was building tools to invade personal privacy, but for a company, for people working there. So I think cybersecurity is like the rare caveat for the like privacy surveillance paradigm. But
okay,
I wasn't thinking about this idea of like, how can I better provide human freedom or build tools that can help people to flourish. But really, I think two main things happened. One, I got into Bitcoin and then ultimately into Monero, which is a privacy-preserving cryptocurrency. Initially, just getting in with the idea of making money, like most people, like just viewed it as kind of like a penny stock, something to mess around with extra money that I had. And thankfully, once I got into Monero, actually, that community is like extremely privacy centric. Like it makes sense. It's like the leading privacy cryptocurrency. But they very much had this like concept of privacy as this root of human freedom and like an underpinning, a foundation of all of the rest of our rights that we should have as humans. And that idea really took hold with me. And there were really good people in that community who like kind of took me under their wing and taught me how important this was and how like obviously financial privacy is a vitally important thing and really necessary to have any other human rights, but that also personal privacy more broadly was important. So this kind of started me on this rabbit hole of realizing not only that like my personal privacy matters, but also thinking like, hey, these people are dedicating their lives to building Monero, to building a tool that they see as really, really important for human freedom. And I'm just using my time to make money and benefit a faceless corporation, which for those of you working at faceless corporations, like that's not to say that necessarily you're doing anything wrong, but it just really hit me that like the vast majority of my time for 40 years of my life are going to be poured into this company or another company like it, rather than towards something that I think can really help people have better lives. And so it very slowly started with just starting a blog, starting a podcast like yours, Lindsey. I just very selfishly wanted to have conversations with people that wouldn't talk to me if I didn't have a platform. And so just the ability to start a podcast and invite people on who I never thought I'd be able to talk to was really powerful. And that like very much accelerated that snowball and ultimately led to me getting into the Bitcoin space full time. And then coming up on a year ago now, starting with Cake Wallet as VP. So it's been a long journey. There's a lot of things we could unpack there, but I don't want to eat up the whole time walking through my past. But that's a bit of kind of how I got here.
Yeah, I love that you're sort of on the other side at first with cybersecurity, sort of, like you said, you doing tools that sort of poke into people's privacy. So what were the things that particularly resonated with you around these conversations on financial privacy, like around the cost of not having it or the importance of it? What really stuck with you or made you go further down the rabbit hole?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I think for me, a lot of what I learned came from talking to people from different backgrounds, like non-Americans, non-Westerners, hearing from people who had been like a part of the Soviet bloc or places where the loss of privacy had actually harmed people either physically or lost their freedom, lost their money, like that there had been serious consequences to not having privacy over the years, or that they had seen governments go from generally good to authoritarian very rapidly. And getting to see that like there are consequences to not taking our own privacy seriously, and there are consequences to governments and corporations essentially vampirically benefiting off of our lack of privacy
Hmm.
was really important for me, because I think something that's really hard, like I'll speak for myself as an American, as a Westerner, that's really hard to understand is I haven't had any real felt loss because I didn't care about privacy before. Nothing major happened to me. Like I didn't get burned in some major way because of a lack of privacy.
Hmm.
So sometimes it can be a little hard to grasp, like, why does this actually matter now? Like, why is this important and not just like a nice to have thing?
Yeah.
And those conversations were really helpful to kind of establish like this can shift very quickly. Like in America, you can have vast differences every 4 years in what the government is like, how they're going to act, what they're going to allow and not allow, and you can have quick snowballs across the world. We've had many examples of countries that have gone from fairly democratic and free to authoritarian within 10, 15 years. So that
Hmm.
was really important for me. I think another piece and something that really stuck with me is I had a conversation with someone on my podcast probably almost 5 years ago now. And he talked about this idea that like privacy is actually necessary for human relationship, which is a really like, there's a lot that we could unpack there, but a really fascinating idea where if you actually are live in a world that has no personal privacy, where you don't have control over who knows what about you actually can't have intimate human relationships that way, because the thing that makes a relationship intimate is that you actually know things about each other that not everyone in the world knows about you. And that was like it's very philosophical, but that was a very big kind of wake up call to me that there's also like social repercussions
Hmm.
to a lack of privacy that I think a lot of us don't think about. So I think those are two examples. I mean, there's dozens that I could point to, but those are
Hmm.
two that stick with me of like what makes this important today. The third that I'll quickly throw out there, in my cybersecurity career, I worked for a company called Cisco, who are a huge, huge IT company.
Hmm.
And I learned while I was there that the company, not my team or anyone that I was working with, but the company themselves were essentially building surveillance tech explicitly for the Chinese government to surveil and oppress the Uyghur people, or they're a religious minority that are being sent to concentration camps and murdered in China.
Oh my
And
goodness. What?
they knew this. The company I was working for, they knew what this was being used for. There's an ongoing court case brought by the EFF against Cisco that the EFF has been winning so far, thankfully.
That's horrific.
Yeah, they knew this, and like that was one of those other things that kind of showed me, like in an even more real way than I ever thought possible, like the things that I do. While I didn't explicitly work on that project. I didn't know of its
Hmm.
existence until the court case became public.
Hmm.
It kind of shook me awake of like what you do with your life matters now. And it also gave me the inverse example of like a lack of privacy for those people in China ultimately could be life or death, and is life or death for many of them. So
Oh
it
my
was like,
gosh.
I don't want to get too serious or dark here, but
Yeah.
there's some good
Hmm.
examples that help us to realize, especially those of us who don't have a felt need right now, that this stuff really does matter today, and that
Yeah.
people do really want privacy. And we
Hmm.
can maybe dive into that a little bit more as well. But
Yeah, definitely. I love that perspective around privacy in relationships because I've never thought of it that way. But you're right. Like, your close friends, like your partners, like the closer the relationship is, then yeah, you know more and more about each other. And you're
mhm.
right. If there wasn't any privacy, there wouldn't be a distinction between that. So that's a really interesting perspective. I really like that. And then yeah, I think like you were saying, speaking to people from other countries, it's very true because I definitely had that perspective before of like, well, I don't have anything to hide or I'm not a criminal, so
Mhm.
I don't mind. But it's like, well, okay, very well, like maybe in a current situation, but if something flips, whether it's a change of government or anything really, and then suddenly there's a consequence or you're a target because of information that someone now has, the consequences can be very severe. Like you're saying, sometimes like life and death, or like we've seen it in history, just where people have been targeted and yeah, the consequences can be quite serious. So I think that's also a really interesting point and perspective to keep in mind. Just yeah, why is privacy important?
Mhm.
All right. So then, how did the opportunity with Cake come about, and like, how did you end up going to work for Cake, and why did you decide to work for them? What was it about the project that resonated with you?
Yeah, so I've actually known Vic, the founder and CEO, since I think 2019. The first
Okay.
Monero conference happened in 2019 in Denver, and we briefly met there. He didn't know who I was. I didn't really know who he was because he had actually just launched Cake Wallet then, and it was very new to the scene. But he launched Cake Wallet as a Monero only wallet for iOS back in the day because there was no other Monero wallet for iOS back
Okay.
then. And so I've known him off and on throughout the years. Have seen that he's just one of the like kindest and most generous people that I know in the space. He's donated to many, many, many different efforts throughout the Monero community. He's been the main funding behind many conferences and events throughout the Monero community. And I've just been able to kind of see who he is. And so that always was somewhat of a draw to me of like, I would love to just work with someone like that, like learn from someone like that. Not to
Mhm.
mention, he also has this background in steel. So he's run massive global companies. He launched
Oh,
Cake Wallet as just a fun thing that he wanted to do because he saw a gap and wanted to do as a side project. And
what?
he's just a fascinating,
Wow.
fascinating guy. So like someone I always wanted as a mentor. So we had like a
Yeah.
good relationship over the years. But about it's probably about a year and a half ago, we just kind of loosely started talking because he had to lean into that steel industry side of his day-to-day job, I guess it would be what you would call it. And so he needed someone to come in and essentially run Cake Wallet, to take over for
Okay.
him while he was more focused on the steel side and
Mhm.
kind of be his right-hand man within Cake Wallet. So I I knew it was something I wanted to do, and as soon as like that became clear, it was a no brainer for me to jump over. I was already in the Bitcoin space, working for a foundation, a fantastic Bitcoin hardware wallet company called Foundation, and absolutely love what they do. But my role there was mostly like marketing and content creation, which I rapidly learned is not something I actually enjoy doing. It's funny to say as someone who has a podcast, but like
Yeah.
I guess the rhythms of your job and your success being you putting out content on a certain schedule, like doing all of that is just very taxing. And I
Yeah.
realized it was something
Like,
I like doing on my schedule, like
yeah.
with people I want to talk to. It's something that's much more life giving to me than when it's something that like is my day job. So I knew I wanted to like get out of that specifically. And on top of that, Cake Wallet have been just doing absolutely fantastic things for years. They've been the leading Monero wallet for years, which is a cryptocurrency that's near and dear to my heart, like I mentioned, for a long
Mhm.
time. They've been really pioneering the boundaries of Bitcoin privacy as well, since long before I joined, doing things that no one else is doing in the space. And it hit home as like the perfect opportunity for me to help Vic, for me to step in and bring a lot of my expertise and background to the Cake Wallet team, and just for me to keep kind of looking for like how am I best using my time to
Mhm.
empower people to seek human freedom and to flourish. And that seemed like a fantastic opportunity for that.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. It sort of all came together. You found a project that was aligned with what you were interested in and got to work alongside someone you knew and had admired. So yeah, it sounded like everything aligned wonderfully for an opportunity opening up. So for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us a bit about Cake Wallet and what makes it different?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, Vic launched Cake Wallet as a Monero only wallet back in
Hmm.
2018. So it's been around for, I mean, that's a long time in this industry. I know 7 years
Yeah,
may not sound like a lifetime, but in the crypto space, that's a long time to be
totally.
around. So he launched as a Monero only wallet on iOS, and then very quickly realized like there's clear demand for a privacy centric wallet across the space. So it started by adding Bitcoin, and then we've added a bunch of other cryptocurrencies now: Bitcoin, Monero, Litecoin, Ethereum, Solana, Tron. We have quite a few, and the vision has always been give people a way to use cryptocurrency to take self custody, not to rely on a custodian or third party, and to be
Hmm.
able to access like the best in class privacy features in a way that's very simple and intuitive. Like the Bitcoin space, the crypto space more generally, so much of what has been built by nerds for nerds, and that's a fine paradigm when something is like a niche technology, when something is just for these people who are like extremely technical and just want to get into
Hmm.
the weeds, but it's just not sustainable for the average person actually being able to benefit from these things. So that's always been a driving factor of how Cake Wallet works. And so that looks like obviously first in class Monero support, which is something that has always been a core part of what we do, is a core part of our user base still. That looks like on the Bitcoin side, having silent payments, which are a new address type for Bitcoin that essentially let you receive payments in a privacy preserving way much more
Hmm.
easily So you can just have one static address. You don't need to get a new address every time. You can post it on your Twitter bio. You can send it in an email, whatever. And people can easily pay you in a way that doesn't reveal anything about you to them.
Nice.
And then we also have PayJoin, which is a
Mm-hmm.
technology so that if, let's say, I'm trying to send you some money, when I actually do that, if we both have wallets that support PayJoin, we'll work together to create the transaction. We'll both contribute inputs, which is a little weird because I'm paying you, but you'll also pay yourself.
Okay.
And the reason we do this is because it hides the amount of the transaction. It hides the true sender in the transaction. And it just provides better privacy without actually requiring you to do anything extra. You're still just scanning a QR code and hitting send, but you get
Mm-hmm.
these extra benefits essentially for free. So those are the kind of the primary ways in which Cake Wallet is trying to make privacy very achievable. And the
Mm-hmm.
fascinating thing that we've seen, and I know we were talking before we started recording about the Bitcoin Vegas conference. The fascinating thing I've seen, especially just this year in going to conferences and talking to regular everyday people, is they all want better privacy. Like this adage of I have nothing to hide, so I don't care about privacy. It's interesting, but it's very anecdotal, and it has not held up in my experience of talking to people because everyone does actually understand that they don't want all of their data online, especially their financial data. Like you just
Yes.
simply ask someone,
Yeah.
okay, then just go ahead and hand me your bank statement or publish that to
Mm-hmm.
Twitter. How would you feel if your bank statements for the last year were published, your credit card statement, whatever?
Yeah.
No one wants that. Like everyone does
Mm-hmm.
want privacy. I think the real answer that people often aren't willing to admit is that they don't know how to actually achieve it. They feel intimidated by the tools that are available, and they feel
Mm-hmm.
like I want privacy, but I have to sacrifice too much to get it, so I'm not going to
Right.
bother. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's been something that's been really like refreshing and encouraging, both from the like philosophical side, seeing how interested people are in privacy,
Mm-hmm.
but also from the business side, that's seeing that building around privacy is actually an extremely viable and profitable strategy, even when you're sacrificing some things to get there. Like it's harder for us to build our app without having any logging or analytics. We don't know anything about our users. We don't know how much crypto they have. We don't know what they do with it. That makes our lives a lot more difficult, but that also
Right.
brings a lot of users and makes people much more comfortable in using so many of the features because they know they're not constantly being watched. So it's been
Mm-hmm.
really cool to see like that crossover, and like you can build a very profitable company around something that right now feels like a niche, but I think is not going to be a niche for
Mm-hmm.
very long.
Yeah, I think there definitely has, or that there is like sort of a sea change happening now that there's more knowledge around just the huge amounts of data that it can be harvested, from all these, whether it's social apps or,
Mhm,
that how much of a currency data is. And then people are like, wait a minute, what? So you're gathering all this info on me. And then with things like, the new, I'm forgetting the name, but, there was that big, law in Europe, I think a few years ago, where
mhm,
now all the any email marketing communications like have to have opt outs and things. And
mhm,
so, yeah, I think there's more awareness around that now. So that's probably helped. So people are realizing just how much of that information is sort of can be collected and then
mhm,
is sold. So I think, yeah, there is more awareness of what can be out there. And I think a lot of people, do want to, like, just like the podcast, like opt out of things. We're sort of so used to like, no, opt out, do not sell my data.
Yep.
And so, yeah, there is sort of more of that attitude like happening. So I think that can only increase, and people can become more aware of like what you can opt out of, or that there is, an option. But like you said, sometimes it's trickier, it's time consuming. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's just about knowing what to do.
and I think like everybody wants control over their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know that you can go too far and be a control freak and it can cause problems, but like everybody wants to be able to control what happens around them. And like
Mm-hmm.
that ultimately is all that privacy is. Like it's not about being anonymous or hiding in the woods. It's not about like any of these kind of scary pictures that maybe come to mind when you think about privacy. It's
Mm-hmm.
really just giving you the choice. Like instead of some other entity having the choice of what they're going to do with your data, when they have
Mm-hmm.
many incentives to do bad things with your data, with the best case essentially being they sell your data to someone else who then does something with your data. Privacy is just about giving you control back. And like I think that's why it's clicking is now people are seeing the negatives of privacy, of a lack of privacy,
Mm-hmm.
and they're starting to see that there are ways that they can take back control. There's fantastic simple tools like Signal for messaging. Even seeing Apple, who are immensely huge company leaning so hard into privacy, both from a technical perspective
Yeah.
and a marketing perspective, should
Hmm.
show people that this is not a market niche. Like, this is
Yeah.
something that is becoming critical, and that companies are going to be made or broken over their ability to offer their users privacy long term. I think Apple is very early on the tech front. There are a lot of other companies pretending while they're actually building really good privacy tech. I'm not a huge Apple fan, but they are doing really cool stuff there. And that's,
Hmm.
I think, another good reminder that, like, there is this clear demand for privacy. People want control. They want to be able to decide who knows what about them. And it's time that we finally give people the tools to actually do that.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good point. So going back to Cake, and you mentioned PayJoin and silent payments. Can you explain how, I guess, in a normal transaction, what would be like kind of an example of how what the benefits are of using that compared to if you would do it like in a way that's, not so private?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's many different use cases here. Like, when we talk about PayJoin, like I mentioned, I think the long term vision is just every transaction you make in Bitcoin is a PayJoin. Like, that one isn't as much of like, do I want a PayJoin here or not? And really kind of hopefully will become the norm as more wallets adopt that standard. When it comes to things like silent payments, I think the thing that I've been trying to clarify for people is, like, it is a privacy improvement, but really it's a user experience improvement. Because for too long we've kind of gotten used to, in this Bitcoin space, in the crypto space generally, this idea of like your address is going to rotate all the time, or it's this just long string of hexadecimal characters. It's not something intuitive. It very much is daunting for a new user who's just coming into the crypto space. Whereas we can use things like silent payments to do usernames in a very
Hmm.
easy, decentralized, and quite censorship resistant way without harming your privacy. Because normally the problem has always been you could do usernames with Bitcoin addresses for a long time, but usually that means you're just using a static address. And then anyone who looks up that username can see every transaction you've ever received and what you did with the funds after that,
Right.
which I think a lot of people don't realize that's actually worse than the financial privacy paradigm we have with banks and credit cards right now. Like, yes, the banks and credit cards themselves have great visibility into what we do, but if you buy something at a coffee shop, they don't learn anything about you other than your credit card number, because they need to be able to charge it. But if
Hmm.
you pay with Bitcoin at a coffee shop, or you put up a donation address that's not something like a silent payment address, it's a regular Bitcoin address, anyone who looks that up can just go to a blockchain explorer and see all of your financial activity, which is a terrifying idea. And again, something no one actually
Yeah.
wants, but the
Hmm.
tools haven't been there yet. So
Hmm.
silent payments really, like, the key breakthrough is less on the privacy side and more that the privacy enables a better user experience without sacrificing that privacy. So now we can do things like tips at sethforprivacy.com, and you can pay me, but you don't learn anything about me. You can't see any other donations anyone else has made. And you can see what I do with the funds you sent me afterwards, just because that's
Hmm.
how Bitcoin works. But you can never see any of the other donations that have been made there. And it
Okay.
doesn't require me running a server. It doesn't require me doing anything complex. It's just enable silent payments on Cake Wallet, hit receive, choose my silent payment address, and use that wherever I want. It also
Hmm.
lets you do some really cool things. Like, we have a feature in Cake Wallet called Bird Pay, which is basically just that you can look up any username on Twitter. And if that user has a Bitcoin address, silent payment address, Monero address, some other things in their bio or in their pinned tweet, you can actually just pay them at their Twitter handle and not have to
Oh, that's
do any address
awesome.
back and forth. You don't have to validate anything. Like, it's super straightforward and helps to kind of start finally making things social again, like
Oh, very
everyone's used
cool.
to with Cash App, PayPal,
Yeah.
Venmo, etc. So there's really cool things you can do with that. And this is like yet another example of how it's really user experience benefits that
Hmm.
get people to use privacy technology. And ultimately,
Hmm.
we want them using privacy preserving technology without even knowing it. Like, the end goal is that people use Cake Wallet. They won't actually care about their privacy yet, but they'll
Hmm.
gain privacy regardless because of the tooling that we're able to build. And that's a lot of the vision that we have.
Nice. Yeah, and that, I mean, that's a really good point you mentioned about, gosh, if you went and bought a coffee, suddenly someone could connect and look at, oh, what else have they been up to? And yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone would want that really. Like, your financial transactions paint, obviously a very clear picture of your
Yeah.
life. I guess like where you are, like physically, obviously what you're up to. And I guess this will be huge actually, like, especially, they're talking about the law to make an exemption for taxes under $200. So if that really helps to, um, if people start using crypto more for everyday transactions, this will be really important. I guess people are going to want to think about using something that protects privacy so that these financial transactions aren't just out there for everyone to see.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially because the thing that's I think often forgotten is that crypto transactions live forever. Like if you make
Yeah.
something in Bitcoin, you make a transaction, hopefully Bitcoin's going to be around forever, and that means your transaction's going to be around forever. And that again
Hmm.
kind of harks back to this idea of like even if what you're doing now is not necessarily bad, like you're donating to a political opponent of a running president or something, maybe the party that they're running for becomes criminal for some reason in 15 years. Like this transaction lives forever. So it's
Yeah.
another reason why it's really important to
Hmm.
think now about personal privacy and not wait until there's this felt need for you, but actually think about it now because the choices you make do affect you, but also to like balance that, it's never too late to start thinking about personal privacy as well.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's great that you're focusing on the user experience as well, because crypto, like you said, is very technical and it can be daunting for people just trying to get involved and understand
Hmm.
the concept. So I think, a good user experience is really key for adoption as well, because if anything is, it just makes it easier for people to be able to get onboarded and then start actually using the technology. So things like the Twitter handle, I mean, it's so simple. Like that sounds like something anyone can do. And
Yeah.
it's a nice concept as well. If you want to either tip someone or send someone money, it's just a great concept. So did you say it was called Bird Pay?
Yeah, it's called bird pay. I know it
Very
doesn't
cool.
necessarily apply anymore now that Twitter's not
Oh,
bird
right.
related, but
I
it
just
was
got the link.
it was before that. So we're
Okay.
we're, we're sticking with the name for now.
I think it's catchy. All right. So there's been, an explosion of interest in technologies like zero knowledge proof. There's a lot of talk about quantum resistant cryptography. Are you thinking about any of these areas? Do they have a place in what you're building at Cake Wallet?
Yeah, I mean they definitely do. I think the thing that's a little tricky with all of these kind of like buzzwords in the industry is that they can mean
Hmm.
a lot of different things. So like zero knowledge proofs, technically Monero actually already uses these. A lot of how it provides privacy is that it uses zero knowledge proofs to allow you to hide the amount
Hmm.
while making a transaction that miners and the person you're paying can still validate that you did pay the right amount. You didn't create money out of thin air or something like that. So like this sort of thing has already been in use in many ways for a long time. And since we're the leading Monero wallet, like we're very familiar with those concepts. But I will say like it's something where we're always looking for how do we bring the best privacy across all the chains that we support. Like we're not just a Monero wallet, we're not just a Bitcoin wallet, very intentionally because we realize and understand what I think many people are waking up to, and that this like we really live in a multi crypto reality, not in a Bitcoin only world, not in a Monero only world, not an Ethereum only world. The
Hmm.
people who are actually like one crypto only are generally the vocal minority, like vast minority. And so we've been building around that idea, and we don't want it to be where only people who use Monero gain privacy, but if you use Bitcoin or Ethereum or something else, you don't. So
Hmm.
trying to keep an eye on in all of these chains, what's the latest and greatest privacy technology, what's user friendly, like we talked about, not something that requires a dozen hoops to jump through and technical expertise, but what can we deploy in a way that users can benefit from very easily. We're always keeping an eye on that. I mean, like a couple examples of that is there is a Ethereum privacy project called Railgun that we're looking into potentially integrating now, so we can bring some better privacy for Ethereum users.
Awesome.
And then quantum resistance is another one where like it's a little tricky because the idea of making a cryptocurrency quantum resistant can't be done at the wallet level. So like we
Okay.
can't as Cake Wallet make your Bitcoin transactions quantum resistant. All of that's going to have to happen at the consensus level, like with the underlying project. So, like Bitcoin would
Right.
need to have a soft fork or hard fork to enable that, and then absolutely, like we would be first to implement that. We would rush to do so to help users be protected in the event that a quantum computer actually becomes powerful enough to be a problem. That's still a bit up in the air, but that's
Uh-huh.
something where we're more reliant on the underlying protocols, Monero to implement something like that, Ethereum to implement something like that before it would be possible. But definitely an area where like we pride ourselves in being first in a lot of cutting edge tech, but doing it in areas that are safe. Like we don't want to be first in like how self custody works because we want to make
Right.
sure that you're not losing your money or doing something
Yes.
haphazard, but being first where it makes sense and pushing the boundaries of privacy, pushing the boundaries of user experience, and trying to bring that stuff as soon as possible to users.
Nice. So have you, for founders building privacy tools, have you seen, mistakes that people make, something that people could tend to get wrong, and, how can people avoid, I guess, making mistakes when it comes to privacy tech?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think from the business perspective, I think what we've touched on a little bit already is the biggest thing to me, and that it's not necessarily about does your privacy tool have the best privacy technology. It's really about how user friendly is it, and does it have good enough privacy. Like I think there's
Hmm.
this tendency within the privacy space that everyone wants to compete on the cryptographic approaches that they're taking to privacy, or like what sort of threat model their tool can fit. And that's all well and good, and there's a space for these like hyper technical, extremely private tools, but the if you look throughout the privacy space, the ones that have been by far the most successful are those that actually didn't take the most hardcore approach. They figured out where it made sense to compromise in small ways to make something that was far more user friendly. I think two really good examples of this are Signal, which is a fantastic messaging app that's private by default and actually has some of the best, most cutting edge cryptography and how the message encryption works. But what they did, I think very intelligently, is they went with a much simpler architecture for how the actual server side works, how the messages between users work. And they didn't do like the most hardcore, most advanced approach in some ways, so
Hmm.
that the user experience could be much closer to using something like a WhatsApp, like a Telegram. And that's how they got hundreds of millions of users was you can use Signal and not actually even know that you're gaining privacy, which is
Yeah.
immensely, immensely important. You can
Hmm.
still, it's obviously still a huge draw. Most people who come to Signal are coming there because they want some level of privacy.
Yeah.
But for instance, all of my family and friends, I've onboarded onto Signal, and that's not because they care about personal privacy, unfortunately. Still working on them. I'm a terrible
Okay.
privacy evangelist, apparently, but they're there because they want the features that it brings. They want the like iMessage
Oh,
like functionality, even if they're using Android or something else. They want to be able to message
okay.
on their desktop. Like
Yeah.
it's other things that bring users, and then they understand, oh, I'm also getting really good privacy from that. Like that's awesome. And that helps with
Hmm.
user retention. So that's a great example. I think another one at a company that often gets kind of maligned in the privacy space is Proton. They make Proton Mail, Proton
Hmm.
VPN, Proton Drive, a ton of fantastic tools. And again, they don't go with the most hardcore, most advanced privacy technology. They make some compromises that often get them a lot of flack from those within the privacy community, but that
Okay.
help to make them more compatible. They help to make them more user friendly, and then they
Hmm.
slowly build from there. And I think there's really good lessons to learn about focusing first on what's the level of privacy that people actually need,
Hmm.
build on top of that as you go, but focus on user friendly interfaces, user friendly flows, making things very, very straightforward for the end user. And those people who want privacy, which I would argue is essentially everyone in the world, they
Hmm.
will come to it once they realize that need for privacy and they realize, oh, it's actually really easy to make the switch to Signal. It doesn't cost me really anything. Or, oh, it's
Hmm.
really easy to switch from Gmail to Proton Mail. It doesn't cost me anything and actually get some cool additional features. So I think those
Hmm.
are probably key takeaways for me.
Yeah, those are really good insights. And I think, yeah, really good points to bear in mind. I remember I saw like a massive influx on Signal after, I forget what it was. Something happened with WhatsApp. I think, yeah, something, I forget what it was now. But it was something to do with, yeah, privacy. And it was just so interesting seeing how, wow, people, because WhatsApp's been so established, and people have been on that platform for years, and seeing people actually make the effort to like download a new app and make the jump. And I guess to your point. A lot of people then are stuck with it, and I guess it probably was because it was like, oh, this looks like every other app that I use. It's they're
Yeah.
familiar with. It has a similar user face, and whereas had they downloaded it and it maybe looked different or required like different I don't know, operating in a totally different way, maybe people would have been like, oh, I don't know about this. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have time to figure it out. But remember seeing that like in real time, like something happened with WhatsApp, a bunch of people then like, oh, so-and-so's joined Signal. And it was just, an easy transition because it is very familiar with what you're looking at. So I think that's a really good point, because I can imagine too, like with privacy, that yeah, there is probably a spectrum of how far you can go. And if you're in the space and you're wanting to build privacy, I can see there's that, motivation to offer, to want to maybe go a bit further and really offer robust privacy features. But I think that's a really good point of like, still make it user friendly though.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so let's see what else. What's coming up for this year? I know you just s- pay you just had a PayJoin just had like a V2 recently. Um, what are you going to be working on? What are you excited about for this year?
Yeah, the big things for us are trying to bring a much better desktop version of Cake Wallet to our users. We've had a desktop wallet app for a long time that's very similar to our mobile app,
Hmm.
but it's kind of honestly been a bit of a second class citizen. So it hasn't quite gotten all of the love that the mobile app has gotten, and it's fallen behind a little bit. So a big part of this year is, or the rest of this year, I should say, is rebuilding that from scratch, rethinking again, how do we make this extremely user friendly? How do we bring more advanced privacy functionality, things like coin control, which is a very basic idea within crypto, but very important to user privacy? How can we do that in a way that's very intuitive and useful for the power user, but also for the absolute noob in the space?
Hmm.
So revamped desktop wallets is huge for us. Along with that, just broader hardware wallet support, so people can spend and save, do it all in one place. So that's really big for us on the rest of the roadmap for this year. Beyond that, Bitcoin Lightning has been a focus for us, but we haven't. I know there's been Lightning wallets out for years. There's been a lot of Lightning influx lately of new wallets launching, but all the latest trends have been essentially sacrificing self custody to be able to provide a good user
Hmm.
experience.
Right.
And we're not willing to compromise on that. Like we like I talked about, we do have an area of compromise that we're willing to make. I think there's some smart compromises, but sacrificing on self custody for us was just too far.
Hmm.
And so we've been kind of surveying the landscape, keeping up with a lot of the latest technology in the Bitcoin space, ways that you can do Lightning in a way that's user friendly but doesn't sacrifice self custody. So we're looking to bring Lightning to Cake Wallet by the end of the year as well, probably using something like Arc or Spark, which are essentially two side chains, if you will, for Bitcoin that make it much easier to actually use Lightning day to day without sacrificing self custody and with still gaining some good privacy from that as well. So Lightning's really the other main focus for us, alongside obviously just continuing to improve Monero support, continuing to improve silent payments and PayJoin within our Bitcoin wallet, and look for other privacy tooling that we can build out there. Looking into Ethereum privacy, like I mentioned, potentially adding some new cryptocurrencies too. But I think really the desktop revamp and bringing Lightning are critical to us. So we can just continue bringing privacy tools to people, making it easier for people to store and spend their crypto, and at the same time throughout our wallets improving the actual swap experience. Because I know that one feature that our users absolutely love is just the ability to swap back and forth between crypto, which makes
Hmm.
sense in this multi-crypto reality that we're in. But continuing to improve and bring better ways for users to do that is also key for us.
Nice. Got lots of exciting things then. And I mean, looking ahead, what do you think wide scale adoption of privacy tools would look like? How would you think that would shift, everyday use of cryptocurrency if privacy just became seamless?
I think the biggest thing would be that users wouldn't feel the need to trust a custodian or a third party to gain privacy. I think a really interesting phenomenon that's happened is I know a lot of people who actually use exchanges to make crypto payments rather than using their own self custodial wallet, because making a payment from an exchange actually reveals less about you than making a payment from your own wallet. It still
Oh,
reveals a lot to the exchange, but it kind
yeah.
of gives you the same privacy model that you have in the traditional financial system.
Hmm.
And I think if we can make privacy tooling the norm, make it the default in as many ways as possible, like we talked about, PayJoin, I think is a great example of that, where it's something that really can become a default and give better privacy to every user of PayJoin. Um, Making it so that these things are just read a few lines of text, click a toggle on, move on with your life. That's going to be vital
Mhm.
to making this possible. But I think really that will help to speed up this adoption of self custody. People being willing to trust themselves with storing their own funds because they're able to trust themselves when spending those funds, that they're not going to reveal their net worth to the coffee shop barista or something like that. I think that will be really important.
Yeah.
I think beyond that, like the other biggest thing would it'll just give people much more mental freedom when actually making payments or when receiving payments. I think something that we often underestimate when we've been in the space for a while is the mental burden that comes with a lack of privacy is also another thing that we didn't really touch on too much today. But when you're always
Yeah.
kind of concerned with what is this thing that I'm about to do going to reveal about me, which I think often you're unconcerned before you start caring about personal privacy, but then there's this switch that flips and you start to realize like, oh, personal privacy matters, but I don't know what to do about it. And a lot of people get stuck there, and there's a lot of mental burden of thinking like, if I make this transaction, what does that reveal about me? If I use this email address or give this out, what does this reveal about me? And one of the beautiful things of privacy tech that's easy to use is it starts to remove that mental burden and give people more freedom, which will help circular economies. It will help with merchant adoption of people actually wanting to accept crypto directly. And I think we'll really just kind of unburden people from being able to use crypto to its fullest extent to empower human freedom and human flourishing.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and, we didn't touch on that, but yeah, I can imagine once you start realizing what the consequences can be or that could be quite stressful every time you go to buy something or make a purchase. Yeah, that would be quite the mental load. Um, is there anything else you wanted to mention or touch upon before we wrap up?
I think just very briefly, like the most important thing I've learned about personal privacy over the years is just don't take too many steps at once. Like take
Okay.
the journey towards personal privacy slowly, take it one step at a time. Figure out what is important to you, what lengths are you willing to go to protect it, and who are you trying to protect it from. Like this idea of threat modeling and figuring out what do I actually care about, what is non-negotiable, what is something I can compromise on. I think just that idea of like slowing down, assessing the situation, and taking actionable steps is really really important and will help save the many people from burnout in the space, which is really common.
Mhm.
So I think that would definitely be something I want to just kind of remind people of. Is like, don't hear this and hear some of the horror stories that I mentioned and think like I got to do everything today, like or the world's going to end.
Yes.
But just do what you can, take slow, actionable steps, think through things, and make the most of what you can. I think that's a really big thing. I think beyond that is just don't feel like it's impossible for you to gain personal privacy anymore. Like I think that paradigm has gone, and most of the most important areas where you should think deeply about personal privacy, things like messaging, things like email, things like your finances, are very achievable today and are not that complex. Like they don't take that much. There is some personal responsibility involved in almost all
Mhm.
of those. There's some areas where other people maybe can't help you recover things if you don't do things properly. Or with self custody of crypto, obviously, you lose your keys and you don't have any backups, you lose your crypto. Like there are downsides to this, but if you're
Mhm.
willing to take that personal responsibility, the tooling has gotten quite good. And so taking those actionable steps, it is achievable, I think, for anyone, from young kid to grandma. I think anyone can kind of take this on and actually be able to gain personal privacy for themselves. And for most people, you don't have to go to the extreme of anonymity and this extreme that I think people think of when it comes to privacy.
Yeah.
But just what do you need to kind of take back control of so that you have the choice over who knows what about you?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think that's really good advice, and it's really reassuring to hear that there are simple steps to take. And I think it's such an important conversation, to have, and people need to think about, especially if as crypto adoption grows, and if people do start using crypto for more everyday transactions, you might not be aware of, what that might be revealing. So it's amazing that there are tools out there now that people can start to become aware of, and then we'll have that choice, you know as behaviors do change and it becomes more prevalent, to know that they can protect their privacy. So Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to talk to you about this topic. Like I said, it's the first time we've covered privacy on the podcast. So yeah, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of these really important insights. Where can people go to learn more about Cake Wallet or connect with yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute blast. I'm glad you're willing to cover the topic of privacy. I think you're on the cutting edge here, so it's encouraging. But as far as where to follow, my only real social media is Twitter. So at Seth for Privacy on Twitter if you want to follow me there. X, forget the new name sometimes, but that's going to be the best place to follow me. As for Cake Wallet, also X is our primary platform, but we are on essentially every social media platform at Cake Wallet on X, and then cakewallet.com is our website. You can learn everything about how the wallet works, what we're doing, easy downloads, that sort of thing. But would highly encourage, like we talked about, like just start to think about taking actionable steps. I think Cake Wallet's the reason I work here is I think they're the best one for financial privacy in the space, but also doing things like downloading Signal and using that, starting to use Proton Mail. There's really cool tools out there. So definitely follow up on it. But thankful for the time, Lindsey.
Yeah, thanks again, Seth. It's been such a great conversation, and all the best with everything this year. Lots of exciting things to watch out for.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it for today's episode of Token for Your Thoughts.